Well, to a follow-up tonight, we're learning more about Brookshire's plans for a new type of grocery store in the Rose City. We first told you about this in March when Brookshire's bought the property at the corner of Earl, Campbell, Parkway and Loop 323 in West Tyler. Now, the company plans on developing that land to build a new generation store, much like locations opened in Shreveport and Bossier City, Louisiana earlier this year. Stores featuring a market, deli and bakery, along with fresh seafood and fresh sushi, along with a broad selection of beer and wine. These new generation stores also play host to a Pizza Hut and a coffee bar. For now, the company does not have a timeline for their new Tyler store.